Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. Got another Master Duel video for you. So I'm coming back to Kashtira. It's actually been a while since I covered like pure Kashtira by itself. A lot of the way that I like to play Kashtira is with the Zodiac, and the last couple of seasons when I've covered the kind of Kashtira strategy of, you know, summoning Riseheart and Era and banishing a bunch of stuff, it's been accompanied by the Zodiac package. But I wanted to try out the more pure Kashtira, so to speak, kind of by itself, and see how I liked it. And I can tell you, playing in Master Rank, I switched to this deck, you know, to get some games for the profile, right? And I immediately ranked up upon switching to Kashtira. It was very noticeable and sudden how much this deck, how much work rather this deck can put in the current ranked ladder format. And one of the reasons I wanted to try a more pure Kashtira build is that one thing that I have observed and actually pointed out in yesterday's video, the latest This Week in Master Duel, was that if you look at decks that have a higher win rate on ranked ladder, even above stuff like Snake Eye, which is the most popular deck, you'll see like Vanquish Soul and Kashtira. And I saw a YouTube comment that pointed out that one possible reason for this is that both of these decks can play the Dimension Shifter, and of course Kashtira in general with the Riseheart has a banish theme going on, but between just being able to banish in general and also having access to Dimension Shifter, a very powerful hand trap that will banish everything that's played, this ends up being extremely valuable in this meta, right? As Snake Eyes, as well as pretty much every other deck out there, is fairly graveyard reliant. This is a very graveyard reliant meta, right? Branded Espia can get away with making some amount of plays of their stuff getting banished. In fact, a good amount of it will even trigger being banished, but you know, Super Heavy Samurai loses getting banished. Snake Eye loses to all their stuff getting banished. What else is out there? Manadium definitely loses to all their stuff getting banished. Mathmech loses to all their stuff getting banished. Pretty much every deck out, and even what then, you know, while Branded Espia can play through all their stuff getting banished, it certainly would prefer, I think, generally that Shifter not resolve most of the time there. So yeah, it ends up being a very, very good hand trap in this meta, and as a result, any deck that can play it has a definite advantage over all the other decks that can't. But again, noticeably Snake Eye, like, things have to go to the graveyard. You know, the Flamberge Dragon is particularly good because its effect triggers no matter how it goes to the graveyard, same with Poplar, but those cards, again, do need to go to the graveyard. Again, making Shifter a very, very good choice. Another just general good thing about Kashtira is its ability to play a lot of off-engine. You know, the limits to Fenrir and not Pervasive, that was already limited, but Birth, this one. Fenrir and Birth limits were pretty harsh for the deck. Well, I don't know about if they were harsh. Like, Birth limit, I do think was a little bit harsh. Fenrir limit, I think, was 100% deserved, and I think 1 is definitely a good number for Fenrir. I don't think it necessarily needs to go to 0. I think 1 did actually end up being fine, even though I did say in, you know, previous videos, past seasons, that I think it should get banned. I think now that we've had it at 1 for a while, it's fine. Birth to 1 was like, it's kind of understandable, at the same time I think a little bit harsh, but even with these cards limited, I think this deck is still quite good. And again, it does have room for a lot of off-meta stuff, or off-engine stuff, rather, to handle meta threats. I mean, we're not using it for anything too crazy, just the usuals like Droll, Nib, Imperm, just like having a variety of stuff. This deck can play under Droll sometimes if you get Max Seed. You could, in theory, like, well, it really depends when they throw out the Max Seed, because, you know, if you open with Unicorn, for example, in this meta, not a lot of people are throwing out the Maxi during the draw phase at all. I don't think it's generally right to, but that means they'll often get the Unicorn summon before they get a Maxi draw. So if you have a Droll in your hand, what you can do is then get the Unicorn, search for the Theosis, activate the Theosis, special the Fenrir, they'll get a Maxi draw. You can use the Fenrir to add the, what is it, Riseheart, special Riseheart, they get another draw, then you Droll. And then, I don't think you search anymore after that, do you? I'm fairly certain you don't. So at that point, you know, you've only given your opponent 2 draws to play out your combo anyway. You know, by that token, it might actually be right to play 3 Droll in this deck. Because I was kind of thinking earlier about this, that I think that in this meta, Droll is so, like, it can be kind of iffy as to whether it's actually good against decks or not. But I mean, even against Snake Eye, which Droll is like the most noticeable deck that Droll isn't that great against, you know, it does, if nothing else, stop Popular, Spell, and Trap card search. And the main thing that Droll can do for decks that can play under it is be used as a max C counter. So I almost wonder if it's worth it to play 3 Droll in exactly decks that aren't affected by it to use against a max C counter, but also against stuff like Super Heavy Samurai, Monodium, the decks that are out there that are affected by Droll. But you know what I should do, actually, and maybe I might even do this like on stream or in a video or something, is like go through the untapped like meta tier list, right? And tally up by percent decks that can play through Droll, decks that can't, and then use that to kind of like mathematically determine the correct number of Droll to play. Just a thought, who knows, maybe. But anyway, yeah, so as far as like consistency boosting goes, we do have some tools to help us with that as well, namely the Planet Pathfinders and the Small World. Not really committing to either, I'm only playing 2 of each. I like playing 2 of each as opposed to like only 3 of one or 3 of both. I think 3 of both is a little bit too much. Like, the thing about Kashtira, and again, especially with Birth and Finra at 1, is we all know the you know, meme about them in Master Duel, which is of course their brick tier. A lot of the time, it is a little difficult to play if you open some pretty bad hands, which, you know, if you're not careful about putting enough searching and or engine in, can definitely happen a fair bit. But I also think it's pretty easy to overcorrect on that. This is kind of one of those decks where, you know, if you open like the Rise Heart and the Theosis and the Unicorn, then, I mean, you don't really have too much to like search for at that point. You could throw in like a Scareclaw cache to help, I don't know, just be part of your line if you wanted to, but you know, so it's one of those kind of decks where you have to ride that fine line, right? Like, you want enough engine to make your plays, but all you really need to make plays is 1 Unicorn, so you still have a good amount of room for off-engine stuff, and you want to be able to have access to that too. But I like the ratios here, but of course, you know, with a deck like this, there are tons of different things that you could or couldn't play. One thing that I'm, I guess, kind of notably not playing that pretty much almost every other pure cash list I saw on Untapped and Master Duel meta was Extravagance. I really don't like Pot of Extravagance. One of the main things I don't like about it is that, you know, these decks like Kashtira, like, yeah, they don't need their extra deck that badly, but at the same time, if you're playing Extravagance, then 1, you have to play 3 of Ice Heart, and I was definitely not trying to craft a 3rd one. And while you don't necessarily have to play a 3rd one, but you know, even if you play 3, you always run the risk of like potentially banishing all 3. I've had games against that, like that against Kashtira rather, that play out that way, where they Extrav turn 1 and then they don't make the Arise Heart, and then, you know, yeah, I'm sitting there wondering why, and then I realized, oh, they banished all of their Arise Hearts with the Extravagance. So. And on top of that, it's like, then you have to play multiple copies of Era, as well as just random stuff like Dark Armed the Dragon, you know, of Annihilation, or Big Eye, stuff that you don't even necessarily go into every game. I don't really like doubling up on cards like this. I'd much rather just like diversify the extra deck. Like, you don't particularly need like any one card in here like that badly, you know, among stuff like Gaia Dragon, Metal Flare, Titanic Moth, Infinite Track, that kind of thing, right? Of course, you know, Era and Arise Heart and Baron and Zeus and Big Eye and Donner I would consider very, very much needed. Goliath to an extent too when it comes up very occasionally, but long story short, I really like Prosperity because you get to choose what from your extra deck you get to send. I really, really hate that Extrav doesn't let you choose, that it doesn't randomly. You know, I just don't think it's worth it in the long run. That's kind of true of Extrav in general. I felt that way playing Extrav in Labyrinth and like some other decks as well. Especially the card being limited. Just, it's like, you have to like skew your extra deck and play really weird ratios to hope to not get screwed over by this random one of that's exactly drawing you 2 cards at the start of your main phase 1. It's like, it's so, is that even worth it? It just doesn't feel worth it to me, but maybe I'm wrong, who knows. Anyway, yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to mention about the list. Let's go ahead and break it down card by card, and then we'll look at these games. Yeah, again, these games were wild. I shot straight from Master 4 to Master 3 as soon as I switched this deck in like literally an hour and a half, somewhere in that neighborhood. Like, that's all it took. So Anyway, so for this list, we're playing 2 Droll Lockbird, 3 Maxi, 3 Ash Blossom, and Joyous Spring, 2 Planet Pathfinder, 3 Kashtira Riseheart, 2 Dimension Shifter, 1 Kashtira Fenrir. We have 3 Kashtira Unicorn, 2 Kashtira Ogre, 1 Scareclaw Kashtira, 1 Nibiru the Primal Being, 2 Triple Tactics Talent, 1 Pot of Prosperity, 2 Small World, 3 Kashtira Theosis, 1 Pressured Planet Raidsoth, 1 Kashtira Birth, 2 Called by the Grave, 1 Crossout Designator, 2 Infinite Permanents, 1 Kashtira Big Bang, and then finally 1 Kashtira Preparations. And that'll be our 40 card main deck. For the extra, we're on 1 Baron de Fleur, 1 Sword Soul Supreme Sovereign Shengyang, 1 number 11 Big Eye, 1 Gaia Dragon the Thunder Charger, 1 Red Eyes Metal Flare Dragon. We have 1 number 28 Titanic Moth, 1 Dark Armed the Dragon of Annihilation. We have 1 Infinite Track Mountain Smasher, 2 Kashtira Shangri-Ira, 2 Kashtira Riseheart, 1 Divine Arsenal Zeus Sky Thunder, 1 Infinite Track Goliath, and then 1 Donner Dagger for Hire. There is our list. Let's go ahead and see these duels now. Okay, our first game is going to be against Branded, and this will serve as a good demonstration of what Kashtira likes to do on turn 1, right? So, in case you haven't seen the deck before, or in case it's been a while, because it actually, this is one of those decks where everyone thought Kashtira was going to be like the biggest meta threat, and that a Riseheart needed to be banned, but it turns out this is just a tier 3 deck that kind of floats around, and tends to do pretty well, honestly. It's got a relatively simple combo line, as we're seeing here. It, again, has the ability to banish. It's a good meta counter pick, so ends up being a good choice for climbing. But as you can see, through this sequence of Unicorn, Theosis for Fenrir add Riseheart, Special Riseheart, Overlay for Ira, and then Riseheart Banish Big Bang, we can now use the Big Bang to add and then Special the Fenrir. Ira will block off a zone. Now that we have blocked off a zone, we can Special Summon the Kashtira Riseheart. I've taken to blocking one of the Pendulum Zones as my first choice, but the other good first choice is to block the main monster zone that is directly underneath the other EMZ. Between that and also putting Shangri-Ira in this EMZ, you can maximize playing against link-based decks. I guess this is like more of a habit from like, last time I played this deck was when Super Heavy Samurai was big, so I was blocking off Pendulum Zones, but in this meta, I don't know, it's probably best to block off a main monster zone first. Unless you think you're going to face a lot of Super Heavy Samurai. I don't know. I've seen the deck, but it still barely see it, Anyway, I'm going to pull out a Unicorn. They're going to normal Aliber. I'm going to activate the Kashtira Unicorn, but not the Fenrir, because I don't want to use Fenrir to banish Aliber. It doesn't really do too much, right? I want to use Fenrir later and get a more high-value banished target. Now, with the Kashtira Unicorn, it went by a little bit quickly there, but I decided to banish Lubellion the Searing Dragon. So the reason that I wanted to banish this card, right, is because a lot of their other high-value targets, they're Albion, the Searing Dragon, I think it's the fusion one, right, Mirror Jade, and in this player's case, Granganol, they were actually playing 2 copies of each, and I only get 1 extract banished. So if I'm only going to swipe 1 card, I think that getting the Lubellion has the highest impact. It stops a more extensive combo line. It also stops them from using Brain Diffusion to send a Dark Monster to then go into the Mirror Jade in case they wanted to do that for whatever reason. Like send the Tragedy and add like a Despia monster or something. So I'm going to start blocking off zones with Ira. I'll use the Riseheart to attach the Big Bang. One thing to note with the Riseheart when you're attaching materials, you should try to attach stuff from your own banish pile first, because it might be tempting to like start picking up your opponent's face down stuff that you banished with the a Riseheart and just to see what it is. But the thing is, if you attach it to, that you banished with Riseheart, but if the Riseheart ends up going to the graveyard, or if it detaches, it'll either banish the card face up or detach it to the graveyard. If the card is an effect that activates in either case, it'll trigger. So it's safest, honestly, to not bother attaching your opponent's face down stuff. I prefer to attach my own things, especially stuff like Big Bang or other Kashtira cards that might have some potential value if they get detached or sent otherwise to the graveyard or banished later for whatever reason. So, alright, Mercurier is going to add Cartesia. This is fine. I'm going to use the Fenrir to banish the Rindbrum before I activate the Era, because the Rindbrum has the ability to potentially, negate the effect of an extract monster and then bounce that card. So I don't want to activate either a Rice Heart or Era while the Rindbrum is on the field. But as you can see, I'm very glad that I saved the Kashtira Fenrir effect and didn't just shotgun it right away, go yellow button turbo and banish the Alibur, because then I was able to save it for the Rindbrum. Once the Rindbrum is banished, I can proc both the Xyz monster effects. My opponent can't bounce them now, and then they concede knowing that they're not able to play moving forward, pretty much. So, because I still have the disruption from the Rice Heart, all their stuff is still getting banished. I'm slowly blocking off their zones, and yeah, things are just not looking good for them. But again, that's an ideal game, turn 1 to victory for Kashtira. So now that we've seen that, we'll see some games that play a little bit differently from the ideal game plan here. So our next duel is going to be against Vanquish Soul, and this game is going to show how Kashtira, while as we've seen it has a lot of combo potential, can also have a lot of control potential too. We're going to be taking the second turn here. And so because I've got a hand that doesn't really have any plays in of itself, I'm going to really want to value the draws off the Max C, but unfortunately, my opponent doesn't really give me any opportunities to draw. Thankfully, I'm just the luckiest player in the world in top deck the Fenrir here. But in hands where you have Max C versus Droll and Lockbird, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to decide which one to activate. And I think a lot of people, when trying to make this decision, focus sometimes too much on what the opponent is playing, when a lot of the time it can be more dependent on your own hand. In a hand where, again, before we top decked Fenrir, we only had Droll C, 2 Droll attacks, and a Birth, I have no inherent plays at all into my turn, right? So I really value drawing cards more than stopping my opponent from adding cards. But again, my opponent didn't summon anymore, and we also topped Fenrir, making it ultimately a bit of a moot point. But I thought it was still worth bringing up, so I'm going to summon Fenrir and then add the Unicorn. Reason is for exactly what my opponent did here, for banishing my Kashtira Fenrir. So I'll go back a little bit fast. I'm going to pause it and explain kind of what's going on here. So when I activate Fenrir to add, I'm going to want to add the Unicorn for, again, not just the reason that my opponent could use Fenrir to potentially banish mine, right? But even if they don't, I can still activate Kashtira Birth and then normal summon the Unicorn without tributing and still go into plays that way. Here, the opponent did decide to use the Fenrir on my Fenrir, which is honestly perfectly fine with me. I'm going to use this opportunity to activate Triple Tactics Talent and look at their hand, because I was a little surprised that they shotgunned the Fenrir that early. Sure enough, as we saw, they did end up having the Max C. So let's go ahead and see what's in their hand and try to figure out what's going on in this game state, right? Alright, so looking at the opponent's hand does clear things up. We knew they had the Rice Heart, right? I believe we did, in fact, see them add this off of the Fenrir. Yes, we did. The other 2 cards in hand end up being the Vanquish Soul Xiaolong as well as the Caesar Valia. So now I know that it ended up being Vanquish Soul that is on just not the best hand in the world, right? So here, the Rice Heart to me isn't really much of anything. They already had access to it with the Fenrir last turn, and they didn't want to do anything with it, so that already tells me this isn't very good for them in this situation. And between these 2 cards, I think the Xiaolong is more likely to represent value because it has the ability to add a card. Basically, if my opponent tops just about any Vanquish Soul monster, then they can get value out of this, but Caesar Valius can be more difficult to get value out of. Also, if they top deck Stake Your Soul in particular, they could reveal this, get a fire that's Raisin, which is very, very good for them. But here, if they reveal an Earth, it's got to be Pantera, which is like, doesn't really do anything for the deck, like, by itself. So, for that reason, I'm going to put back the Xiaolong. They can keep Rice Heart and the Valius. I'm going to activate Birth, and then I'm going to normal summon the Unicorn without tributing, not special summon it by its own effect. So I've already decided that I don't want to try to OTK them this turn and play through the Max C, because I already got an inclination based on how they played on turn 1, but now I know for sure their hand is just not that great. And furthermore, even if they top deck something, I have Maxi and Joel and Lockbird. So, like, there's not too much they could do that they couldn't, like, or that I couldn't, you know, mess them up pretty easily and or draw a bunch of cards. So here, I'm just going to try to activate the Unicorn. They do reveal their last card as Imperm. That is absolutely fine with me. Now I have all the information available to me except for the top card of their deck. Which again, even if it does end up being something, I have both Joel and C. So I'm going to battle over the Fenrir and pass. I decided to Maxi during the standby phase or just before the main phase in case they top decked like a Kashtira Unicorn, right? I want to get a special or a draw for that special summon. But then, yeah, as I go to begin my turn, they're just going to end up conceding because they ultimately know, like, what's going to happen here, right? Because they also know that I know that they don't have anything. But also from here, it's so easy. Like, I have so many options. I can Unicorn for the Theosis. I can Birth for the Fenrir back, and then, I mean, they don't know that I have Riseheart in my hand already, but then I could Fenrir for Riseheart, and yeah, they know it's pretty over for them at this point in the game. All right, got a couple more games to check out. Let's see the next one. All right, coming up, we got a game here against Tier Limit. Now, this tends to be a pretty good matchup for the Kashtira player. That'd be me in this case. Mostly because of the ability to banish cards, such as with the Dimension Shifter, which we do in fact open here. So, opponent's going to start off with the Pearl Rhino. You'll notice though that I did not end up using the Ash Blossom. Instead, I let it resolve. And you might be wondering, well, why did you not use the Ash Blossom? Basically, I wanted to see, one, if it was actually going to be Tier Elements or Monadium, and get that little bit of information. If I Ash Blossom now, then I don't have access to that necessarily. But two, I also want to see if it is either deck, you know, well, I guess to be fair, if it's Monadium, they'll just always add the Visus. But if it's Tier Limit, if they add the Rhino Heart or if they add Shiren. So if they would have added Shiren, I would have used the Dimension Shifter as soon as the priority passed back over to me at the end of the Chain Link because I have my toggle set on. That way, I get the ability to banish before they have the ability to send a card with the Shiren, right? Although, you know, Shiren sends as part of the effect, so I can still just wait and chain there, too. But I was also thinking if they normal summon, if they added the normal summon Rhino Heart, I can just chain the Shifter when they summon the Rhino Heart. So I guess either way, no matter what they play, I can just wait till they activate the effect, and then Shifter, and then they have to banish the card, they don't get to send it to the graveyard. King of the Swamp's going to add a Poly. That's fine. I will say that I don't like that I let that go to the graveyard as a result, but King of the Swamp's like not the most normal tech with it being limited, so plus it's also not like the biggest deal. But yeah, here they're just going to end up banishing their tier cash and then passing back over to me. Unfortunately, we're seeing where Brick Tira gets its name case here, as I only have another Riseheart, which I'm just going to normal summon, activate, and then pass back over to my opponent. I did decide to activate it, just in case, just to hedge, really, honestly. Especially against Tier Limit in its current state, where they have so few fusers. It's not, like, the most unlikely scenario in the world that I actually managed to mill, like, a Havness here, and it severely hampers what they're able to do. I don't know, maybe, but, you know, here, of course, they just end up having these Shiren anyway. And, yeah, actually, so this, I could wait and chain the Shifter to when this activates, because it sends the card as part of the effect, not as a cost, which, of course, it would, because Tier Limit cards have to be sent to the graveyard as part of an effect in order to activate. So that makes sense anyway, but yeah, I will use the Ash Blossom on the Shiren. I do think that Shiren is one of the better Ash Blossom targets, but unfortunately for me, they do still have that polymerization. That means they not only get to summon Kikolos by using Poly to fuse for it, but now they get to activate the effects of both Shiren and, if they have another Tier Limit card in hand, Rhino Heart, on top of already getting to use Kikolos. So, you know, at this point, I knew they had more than enough gas. So I was like, you know what, you can have it. I'm just out here. So I do think there is a bit of timing to using Shifter. I like, if possible, waiting to like force your opponent to banish a card they don't want to, but sometimes it is better to just fire it off earlier, and just making sure that you're stopping your opponent from doing things a little bit like Maxi in that regard. Also, definitely have to be mindful of making sure that you don't like put cards in your graveyard before you want to Shifter. Like, I couldn't Ash Blossom and then Shifter. That is another reason why I didn't Ash Blossom the Pearl Rhino, right? So, all right. Yeah, all right. We have one more game to watch. Let's go ahead and finish off the video with that. Okay, final duel for this video will be up against Hero. A lot more heroes on ladder. They're going second game too. Wow, all but the first one. A lot more heroes on ladder, of course. That's because of the recent release of the elemental hero Flame Wingman Inferno Rage. But it's going to lead with the Vision Hero Ferris. As soon as that hits the board, I am going to fire off the D-Shifter. But it's going to Mask Change in response into the Dark Law. Dark Law is a really scary card for a lot of decks, but funnily enough, Kashtira actually does not end up being one of them. Able to play through the Dark Law rather well, honestly. They're going to normal summon Vion, banish the Plasma from deck, and then banish a Neos in the grave in order to add a Polymerization before passing it back over to me. Get another Dimension Shifter, that's not really going to do anything here. Going to special the Fenrir, but it's got the Favorite Contact going for this Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. But given my current hand and... yeah, just my current hand and board state in general, I already know I can actually play through everything my opponent has. I'm going to add the Scareclaw Kashtira. This will end up triggering the Dark Law, but what I can do is I can activate the Scareclaw Cash as a response, right? This and the Theosis are the main cards I care about. So I'm going to special summon the Scareclaw Cash by banishing the Ogre in response to the Dark Law. That'll leave my hand being D-Shifter, Theosis, Theosis. Now it doesn't matter what they hit, because even if they hit a Theosis, I'll still have another one. And if they do hit a Theosis, I'll get to actually wheel the Ogre back to my hand. DPE is going to chain in response. This is completely fine. I figured they would do this sooner rather than later to get rid of the Fenrir, and so that I wouldn't proc the, ability to banish a card. But we can definitely still out their board state with this. In fact, as soon as I activate the Theosis, yeah, my opponent's going to concede, because the Scareclaw Cash already represents the ability to battle over their things, but with the Theosis, I can special summon Unicorn, Unicorn F to add Birth, activate Birth, Birth bring back the Fenrir, and did I add the Scareclaw? Hang on, did I add the Scareclaw Cash with the Fenrir? I'm trying to remember. I did, so I wouldn't be able to add a Rise Heart. Is kind of the main thing, but I would be able to normal summon the Ogre without tributing, because I'm pretty sure I didn't use a normal summon. And I mean, to be fair, even if I don't win the duel this turn, at that point all the opponent has left is the Vision Hero in the Spell Trap Zone and the Polymerization hand, plus one top deck. It's like, that's super fine. Especially going into like Fenrir, Unicorn, Ogre, literally all of the level 7 Kashtira monsters. Alright, that will end up doing it for this video. Hope you enjoyed these games. Like I said, this was a very, very surprisingly efficient play session with Kashtira. Just shooting straight up a rank immediately as soon as picking this build up here. But anyway, let's go ahead and now finish off with the outro. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. That means a lot to me. It's also a great way to support the channel, so thank you very much in that way as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other ways, like the very special patrons that I am thanking here, you can do so by checking out some of the links in the description. One of those goes to the Patreon, where you can join these fine folk and support the channel that way. I do post daily content over on Patreon, so you do get something for supporting there. And if you're interested, I also have a coaching tier option as well. Details again will be on Patreon in the link below. Also in the description linked below is my Twitch page where I stream a few times a week. You can go ahead and check that out, follow or subscribe over there if you ever want to catch me live. You'll also find my second YouTube channel if you feel like subscribing over there to watch some of the Twitch VODs as well as some additional non-Yu-Gi-Oh related content that I make over there. Again, any of those links you want to check out is all a great way of supporting. But again, even if you don't do that, just watching was also a fantastic way to support. And once again, I have to thank you so very much. But in any case, this is Hexlex. I'm going to be signing out, and I'm hoping you have a fantastic day.